How in the world do we make sense of the world? We do it with something called perception. I've lived in North America all my life. To my friends and colleagues, I'm considered Japanese. But when I'm here in Japan, people know instantly I'm a foreigner before I even utter a word. Our culture has a big part in creating our perceptions. But it all starts up here. The brain actually physically constructs and colors a world for us. The brain takes the chaos out here and orders it in a way it decides will be most useful for us, allowing us to see, smell, and hear certain things. But how does the brain do that? We're about to find out. I'm David Suzuki, and I'm going to show you how the world up here shapes the way we perceive the world out there, and what it means to see and not see.
Our eyes may be the front doors to vision, but strangely enough, they aren't where sight happens. All our senses really happen back here, in the strange, mysterious folds of the brain. Motionless and dead silent, it's racing to make thousands of lightning-fast decisions every second of every day. The world of art bears a fascinating truth about brain study. Each of us sees the world differently. Vision, or visual perception in the brain, is a unique experience. You and I may look at the same thing, but thanks to our brains, we see it differently. We begin this journey into the brain where we'll see how we see in an artist's studio. It's a place where seeing is a way of life. Bold, vibrant, larger than life, Tetsushi Iwashita's paintings demonstrate the power of the brain to create a personal picture of the world. Tet-chan's vision is especially personal because he sees with only half of his brain. At 15 months, Tet-chan suffered a terrible fever which damaged his brain's right hemisphere and paralyzed the left side of his body. The fever also left the young boy with learning disabilities. Today, he has learned to cope with the outward physical effects of the damage to his brain. But it's the artworks, begun at an early age, that most interest us. They are expressive reflections of the world he sees, of the colors and textures that captivate him. These paintings, these worlds begun with the gentle guidance of a brush on paper, are windows into the mysterious workings of the brain, Tet-chan's, yours, and mine. Today, Tet-chan will see his brain for the first time with magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI. It uses a strong magnetic field and radio waves to map out an image of the brain. It shows the badly damaged right side of Tet-chan's brain, but the left hemisphere has grown larger toward the right, perhaps to compensate for the damage there. Though Tet-chan's eyes function normally with 20/20 vision, his brain does not. And it's his brain, not his eyes, that actually creates the images he sees. Tests measuring his field of vision, and remember his eyes are 20/20 accurate, point to the role the brain plays in seeing. This is the visual field of a normal person. Each eye scans a broad circular field. Tet-chan sees with both eyes, but the damage to his brain has cut the visual field of each in half. A computer-assisted eye camera simulates the way Taechan sees by blocking portions of his field of vision and responding to his eye movements. It's a miraculous device that takes us into Taechan's remarkably difficult visual world. Only by scanning with his eyes much more than the average person can Taechan see the whole picture. The brain takes information from the left and right fields of vision and reads them separately. Information from the right side of the visual field is reflected on the right half of the retina and then conveyed to the left side of the brain for processing. It's just the opposite for the other side. Taechan's damaged right brain can't read what's on the left half of the field. The incoming signals have nowhere to go. "128 separate cross-sectional images of Taechan's brain were used in this three-dimensional reconstruction. It shows the devastating effects of his high childhood fever and a brief related coma. Taechan's brain, like all of ours, constantly works to build and interpret the images coming in through the eyes. These images are simply countless points of light. It's only the center of the visual field that we see sharply. We take in the whole, like Taechan, by moving our eyes, thereby shifting the readable center. This complex split-second process, which each of us performs thousands of times a day, produces the world as we see it. We use both eyes to perceive depth. When we focus on the sunflower in front, each eye also sees the flowers in the background, but each from a slightly different perspective. It looks like this from the left eye, and like this from the right. The brain then calculates the difference between these two viewpoints and perceives depth. Now let's travel deeper into the mysterious folds of the brain to see how meaningful images are created. It starts when incoming light is converted to electricity by these strange devices called rods and cones. Kiki, whom your eyes are gathering now, will help us with the rest of the trip. First, incoming light information is flipped upside down. Next, the information breaks up into fragments. Then, at the crossroads of the visual fields, it splits. Sorry, Kiki. The fragmented pieces then make their way to the primary visual cortex, found at the back of the brain. This layered region filters and codes the information. Now Kiki's trip gets even more complicated. All that coded information is parceled out to as many as 32 locations for finer processing. The cerebral cortex, the brain's quarter-inch thick thinking cap, consists of tightly packed columns of nerve cells. It's the number of columns and their complex web of neurons that set us apart from other animals, what makes us human, in fact. Here, we finally see the world. Inside each column, neurons form networks of fierce activity. Each neuron, through its numerous branches, sends or receives electrical messages from neighboring neurons. The messages fly over connections called synapses seen in red. Without these crucial links, information couldn't travel throughout the brain. A single neuron may have thousands of synapses, so a single column may contain millions of these transfer points. It makes for some rich and complex conversations among brain cells. Information continually bombards the brain. To manage it, the cortex uses the division of labor principle. Here, neurons begin sorting the still jumbled scene. We know Kiki is in there somewhere. Every column has a complete set of neurons, each designed to seek out a specific angle from 0 to 180 degrees that might be found in the various shapes within the scene. It's a bit like finding the edges of a jigsaw puzzle first. As the process continues, thousands of lightning-fast tasks rage beneath the brain's surface. It's a race to make the round edges sharp, to find in the incomprehensible jumble something or someone we recognize. Eventually, the outlines of a face appear. All of these visual bits and pieces are processed and coded by assigned neurons. While one set of neurons is busy reading the contour of a cheekbone, another will read the shape of the eyes or the slant of the nose. It's an incredibly evolved bit of natural computing, and at the end of this split-second journey, when everything is reassembled, a familiar image appears. So many combinations. Experts speculate that the brain builds on what it learns while processing simple patterns, enabling it to perceive increasingly complex shapes or other forms of information. This epilepsy patient is about to undergo a miraculous procedure. While doctors operate on her brain, she will actually remain conscious in order to answer a battery of questions. The questions will be about her vision, so we'll be able to see the process of sight at work in a living brain. As you might have guessed, the procedure focuses on the brain's electrical activity. Electrodes, tiny probes which measure electrical activity, will be placed in the brain. Blood vessels must be given a wide berth, but because the brain has no nerve endings, the patient will feel no pain. The electrodes are placed in particular sites of the temporal lobe, where visual information is processed. While the patient watches a screen in front of her, she is asked which of the 3 lettered shapes matches the one on top. The probes should identify which cell contains the neurons involved in determining the shape shown. This cell reacted to the slanted line.
A, stirring, rape, C.
As the shapes become more complex and she is finally shown faces, many different cells responded. The ability to see and recognize faces, a rather sophisticated task, calls on entire systems of neural networks. So, accurate pictures emerged for the patient as information swept through her cortex. But exactly how this information is reassembled remains a riddle. When just part of a processing system is damaged, the result can be quite peculiar.
Let's try the next one. What about him?
It may be another politician. It looks like Prime Minister Tanaka.
Kakue Tanaka, you think? I see.
Yes, yes, it's the longish teeth.
Longest teeth, I see. What about the hairstyle?
I haven't seen Kakue Tanaka recently.
Do you know if it's a woman or a man?
It's a man.
You don't remember seeing this shirt before?
No, I don't think so.
It's you, Mr. Soda, though. This was taken quite a while ago.
It is? I don't recognize it. I don't even recognize my own picture. Is this really me? Look at all these wrinkles.
The damage to Mr. Isoda's brain left him without the ability to access the who and sometimes the what of an object. Damage to other parts of the visual system led to different unusual problems. This woman suffered a stroke 14 years ago. Now her view of the world is dramatically skewed. She cannot detect how full the glass gets. She sees the water, but she doesn't see the water rising. She can no longer detect motion. The stroke interrupted the neural pathways that process motion, the where of the visual scene. Hers is the only reported case of its kind. The world her brain sees for her is terribly disjointed. Simply watching a car pass by can be a frightening experience. She sees in freeze frame. Her physical world is made up of disjointed still images, like the pictures on a film reel, except there are large gaps between each of them. A mere stroll down the street can be terrifying, for there are so many moving objects to understand in those flashing still frames. And many of those moving objects could hurt her. When both she and the object she is looking at are moving, things get even worse. It probably looks something like this. When just one of the many parts of the brain's visual system is impaired, our view can be dramatically altered. But the human brain, even when damaged, has a remarkable ability to adapt. When one sense fails, we can learn to rely on another. Frequent field trips to observe the subjects he will paint are a part of Taechan's creative routine. They demonstrate one of his most intriguing adaptive skills. Animals like these skittish seagulls can only be observed from a distance. Close observation and physical contact are impossible. Later, the gulls clearly lack the spirit and texture of his other works. So whenever possible, Taechan makes up for what his brain can't see for him by touching. It's an active process of scanning with his fingers, much as he, or any of us, scans with his eyes. This adaptation, this supplementing one damaged sense with another, is a fundamental technique in Taechan's work. Sight and touch are integrated as he studies a subject, locks an image in memory, and then paints it in one single, intense session. Taechan's art is a triumph over disability. His method is a fascinating demonstration of the brain's ability to adapt. But it's not all in the head. Here, Taechan's heart clearly plays a role. It's an intimate and tactile relationship between artist, subject, and the work itself. Here's how touch works. Special cells in the skin convert touch into electrical signals that are sent to the spinal cord and up to the brain. All information about touch is first sent to a thin strip of cortex. This little strip is actually a detailed map of the body. But it's a distorted map. The brain gives certain parts of the body priority, like the hands, the face, the lips, the tongue.
If we were to reconstruct our body according to this neural map, we would look a bit warped. Our fingers would grow huge, as would our lips and tongue. No two neural maps are alike, though. They reflect our individual development and experiences. Braille readers, for example, gather information through the touch of their fingertips, and so that area in the cortex grows larger. It actually takes over other sections of the map. We're beginning to see, then, how the maps in our brain can construct a kind of personalized view of the world. How we take the physical stuff out there, the light waves, particles, and matter, and make them mean something. That's also what we do with sound.
Sound is purely mechanical, produced by physical vibrations. The outer ear gathers and funnels sound waves into the eardrum, causing it to vibrate. These vibrations rattle the bones in the middle ear that connect to the cochlea. This is where the vibrations are translated into electrical impulses. These signals then travel along a number of interwoven pathways to the auditory cortex and beyond. The cells in the auditory cortex respond to discrete features of sounds. Some neurons respond to pitch, others to volume, and others to direction. Now the process starts to look familiar. Just as with the visual impulses, which we saw earlier, assigned neurons start coding and recoding all the bits and pieces of sound information. Where before they started to outline what the eyes had transmitted, here they work to define what the ears have sent. Similar processes are underway to make sense of other information the ear gathers here. Remember how the brain coordinated both eyes to create depth perception? Well, now it's processing data from each ear to determine the location of certain sounds. This is all pretty standard stuff for the way most of us hear.
Come on, everybody.
But this man, Leslie Lemke, hears like very few people on Earth. Right now, he's reciting verbatim a boxing match he heard only once.
Hold on. There he is.
Leslie is well known for his prodigious gift of music and memory. Mentally retarded and blind, he is shut off from much of our world. But sounds break through and are music to his ears. Leslie's adoptive mother recognized his gift early, and his life has centered around music ever since. He has never seen a sheet of music, and he's never been formally trained, but you'd never know it.
Listen carefully.
He can replay any song after only one hearing.
Sure.
Leslie has a heightened sense of hearing. His body and brain block much of the incoming sensory traffic, but sounds he absorbs in volumes. Sounds that blend into the background he discriminates, pays attention to, and marvels at. Discerning listeners note a lack of nuance in his music.
Say, I believe in miracles.
In fact, Leslie's music is probably not an interpretation of what he has heard, but a recitation, a bit like reading poetry as if it were prose. But in the comfort of certain familiar surroundings, when friends have gathered near, and family has drawn close by your side, none of that seems to matter very much.
Try this. See what you think.
Okay. It's very citrusy.
Yes. It evokes a very invigorating feeling. Other than only citruses, there are fruits in it, there are melons, there are flowers. There are maybe close or more than 1,000 ingredients in the base you're smelling right now.
The perfumer knows the power of a scent.
In the world of human perception, our sense of smell tends to take a back seat. After all, we walk upright and our noses are far off the ground. But every time I smell a certain perfume, vivid memories of a high school love come flooding back. It's as if my sense of smell has opened a door onto the past.
In evolution, the oldest of them all is the sense of smell. Interestingly, it is also the first to develop in the womb. The flavors of foods mothers consume have been detected in the amniotic fluid. Perhaps the unborn child is bonding with its mother in the womb through smell, gaining experience about mother's diet and her olfactory identity. A newborn shows a variety of responses to smells difficult for adults to detect. such as the precise smell of its mother's breast. We rely on the sense of smell at this stage more than we ever will again. Odor molecules sniffed through the nose or pumped up the tongue and cheeks into the nasal cavity are picked up by cilia, or tiny hair-like projections of the olfactory neurons. There, the smells are translated into electrical signals. These signals are sent directly to the olfactory bulbs. With only one synapse to cross, the pathway is almost an open road to the brain. Though they are spread throughout the cortex, olfactory neurons have particular circuits wired to the limbic system. That's where our emotions sit. And to the endocrine system, where hormones are produced. Because of these special links, we can think of smell as the most excitable of our senses. With the sense of smell, we sniff out foods we like and dislike. Smells produce cravings. They arouse, stimulate, and frighten. They also send warnings about things that are otherwise undetectable, like leaking gas or spoiled food. Thanks to the strong emotional link associated with smells, we don't easily forget negative experiences, like getting sick from certain foods. The smell alone can trigger symptoms of nausea, lest we forget and give the food another try. The last sense through which the brain receives information from the outside world is taste. The receptors on the tongue are geared for picking up just 4 basic qualities of taste: salty, sour, bitter, and sweet. All the more subtle tastes we experience are largely a function of smell. Our bodies need certain foods, yet our eating habits are mostly learned, a result of tradition and culture. These food preferences are built up and stored in the brain's memory banks, spread in neural networks throughout the cortex. So even though we might not be aware of it, our brains use their stores of memory to determine what foods we select to eat. There's still a great unsolved mystery locked deep within the brain. We know that information bits sweep through the cortex in such a way that a clear perception emerges. But no one has proved how or where exactly this information gets assembled. Dr. Antonio Damasio is a leading neurologist at the University of Iowa Hospital. While some search for a final assembly point for perception impulses, he's not so sure there is such a place.
You probably don't need to have a place where it all comes together. In fact, there is I don't think there's any evidence anatomically that an image of sound, like the image of my voice now in your brain, or the visual image that you're now having of the scene, that they ever will coalesce together in the same structure. I don't think there's any evidence for that. I think that what you have evidence for is that they can be temporally synchronized. And there is evidence that there are structures that have signals that hail from those respective images. And therefore there's a linkage, but the linkage is not made at the level of the image itself. So it's not my image of your face together with my image of your voice in the same cortex. I think that those remain separate, but they can be brought online at the same time.
Currents of data feed forward throughout the brain and then loop back, from sensory areas to memory centers and back again. Based on new imaging techniques like functional MRI and PET scan, many researchers now believe that perhaps these parallel networks bind together in synchrony, a kind of harmonic convergence to produce what we call perception.
So I have all this activity going on that is representing you in perception right now. And what my brain is actually storing is not your picture, but rather the mechanisms that are being utilized to create the perception of you. And tomorrow, when people ask me about you, I'm going to go into those mechanisms and I'm going to try to make them do the same thing that they're doing today. And then they're going to generate an image that is not going to be quite the same as seeing you right now, but it's going to have a lot in common with what it is being done today. So what I'm going to have is an attempt at replicating the patterns of activity of today. And during that period, I create an image and I'll bring on lots of other images that pertain to you.
Sensory data constantly stream into the brain. Our brain attaches associations and memories to allow us to make sense of what we see, hear, and touch before us. We perceive the world as a constant, unified place, and that's because the brain acts as a filter. But what if the barrage of information pours in unabated? That's the world of the autistic. Their systems don't properly control the information sent to the brain by their sense organs, so almost everything gets in simultaneously. Their experience of the world has been likened to watching a television whose channels all come in at once. Clamoring, relentless sensations overwhelm, and as a coping mechanism, their bodies often just shut down. That cruel, tortured existence isn't a life sentence for all autistics. There have been some remarkable journeys back to peace and normalcy. Temple Grandin is an assistant professor of animal science at Colorado State University. She's known around the country as a livestock handling systems designer. Dr. Grandin is autistic. With the help of her family and with intense progressive therapy, Temple slowly emerged from the confusing sensory overload that had shut her off from the rest of the world. It was a journey of startling revelations.
When I was a child, some of my biggest concerns were dealing with the sensory problems. Now, I didn't realize that other people's, hearing was less sensitive. I thought, well, maybe I just wasn't a strong enough person. It was only, maybe 7 or 8 years ago that I realized the full extent of how sensitive my hearing was compared to everybody else's. But I spent an awful lot of time worrying about things that were going to scare me, like the school bell going off. I mean, that school bell, when it rang, that just hurt my ears, like a dentist drill going up the ear.
Touch is a paradox for Temple.
They want it, but then they don't. This is the same way I was. I wanted to feel a nice feeling of being held, but then it was just too overwhelming. One of the reasons why the autistic child withdraws is because his sensory systems are bombarding him with so much stimuli, he can't stand it. It would sort of be like being inside a pinball machine, being bounced around, bombarded with light, sound, and touch sensations.
When she was 18, Temple got an ingenious idea. She built a home version of one of these, what the cattle industry refers to as a squeeze chute.
I got the idea from the squeeze chute used on the cattle. And I noticed that when some cattle were put in there, pressure tended to relax them. If you didn't squeeze them, they would tend to jump around and get upset. And I saw that, and I thought, well, maybe that helped calm me down. I mean, basically, it's like a padded version of a squeeze chute. Completely foam rubber padded on the inside. get in here like this, and head through here, and when I pull on this lever, it will squeeze me. I can control the amount of pressure. See, one of the problems I had when I was a child is I couldn't stand to be touched. And what therapists are doing now is they work on desensitizing the child. You work on gradually encouraging more and more and more touch. When I first built this, I would pull away from it. But the fact that I could control it, if it got to be too intense, then I could stop it. See, I can control the amount of pressure. I pull the handle towards me, squeezes. If I push it away, it lets go. When I get in here, I get really calm, and I get to where, I don't want to talk very much.
Human communication demands a high level of synthesis, with many signals coming in at once. Temple's brain has trouble processing the complexities of extended contact with people.
Animals are much easier. I mean, before a bull charges, he gives you definite signs, like pawing the ground. I mean, the cattle give you definite signs. Like someone might say to me, aren't you worried about getting stepped on? Well, none of them were showing any aggressive behavior. Now, there were a couple of animals that were butting each other to each other, and if they got to doing too much of that, I'd get out of the way. But animals will give you very clear-cut signals as of what they want. You hear these cattle bellowing? See the feed truck's going up there, and they know the feed truck's coming. And see, they're going up to the feed truck. They're telling you exactly what they want. They're easier to figure out.
They seem to like her pretty well, too. Her affinity with cattle is genuine and probably unique. It's certainly an important factor in her success as a designer of equipment used to manage them. If we didn't know her story, it might look awfully peculiar. But it's really a victory over a terror most of us can only imagine. And it's all been determined by how she viewed the world. That is, how her brain tamed the unruly sensory information it received. Its wonders exhaust the imagination. This man's childhood fever set him on a path filled with challenges of the most basic sort. But remarkable adaptations in what remains of his brain have made for a purposeful and apparently happy life. In a world of subjects that compel him to paint, we are richer for his interpretations. At Tetchan's annual exhibition, new and active eyes feast on his vision of the world. That vision is based on complicated functions his brain performs to make sense of his surroundings. Our brains, just like Tetchan's, create and deliver all that we know of the world around us. From infancy, we build maps of experience. These maps for seeing, tasting, and touching, for memory and emotion, these maps, when similar from person to person, are what bring individuals together into a society or culture. Our perceptions are often shared, but our brains also make them uniquely our own.
Amazing to think that the physical universe around us is deconstructed, then reconstructed by this inner universe called the brain, and that these perceptions become, in fact, our reality. Long ago, my brain told me to appreciate a hot dog with mustard, but to avoid the relish. Long ago, it had no experience of the seafood delicacies here in Japan. The neural maps in here come to reflect our culture. I've learned to enjoy relish and Japanese seafood. If my brain lacks or reflects certain values, I can add or change some of them. And even if my neural networks don't look like your neural networks, does it really make me that different from you? Is my wiring somehow better or worse than yours? For the Discovery Channel, I'm David Suzuki.
日本語で話してください。